What's going on, everybody? This is Lauren with the TMF Podcast. We're going to talk about 6 things the jury is not going to consider during deliberations in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. Now, if you've been following the trial, it has been a whirlwind, to say the least. We've had all kinds of controversy surrounding this trial. Now, let's go into some things that the jury is not allowed to deliberate in there or take into consideration when coming up with whether or not he is guilty or not guilty. The first thing is going to be unflattering videos of Rittenhouse, things that have happened post Kenosha, right? So we've had some incidents come out where he was wearing a t-shirt that said "Free Us" on it out in public. They cannot consider that. There's also another video filmed where people were rushing out of a CVS that they had just probably robbed. And he said, "Bro, I wish I had my effing AR. I'd start shooting rounds at them." Now, this is where they're saying that it could have been him saying that. There's also argued at the time CVS showed Rittenhouse fervently sought to insert himself as an armed vigilante into situations that had nothing to do with him. However, this is not allowed to be taken into account during their deliberations. They can only account for the things that happened during the time of the incident, nothing that happened afterwards. Another thing that they are not allowed to talk about is the criminal records of Joseph Rosenbaum, Huber, or Grosskreutz, right? The 3 men that have been shot, 2 died, 1 did not. They cannot talk about the criminal records because they are not pertinent to this case. Kyle Rittenhouse did not know any of the 3 men going into this altercation. Therefore, their criminal background is not related to this. You can't say, well, Rosenbaum had a criminal history with children. Kyle Rittenhouse would have not known that. So any of his actions had nothing to do with their background. As far as them being charged, obviously 2 of them won't be charged with anything because they're dead. The last one, carrying a pistol as a felon, clearly not okay. But that being said, none of that can be held accountable to this case. They cannot use any of that against him, either for him or against him, rather. They cannot talk about him being spotted at a pub with Proud Boys members. Prosecutors also wanted to show photos of Rittenhouse posing with members of the Proud Boys in a Wisconsin pub shortly after he had been released on bond. In the photos, that is when he was wearing the t-shirt that said "Free As" on it and flashing an okay hand gesture, which people still think it stands for white power. I've never in my life heard that this was white power, but this is what we're going with. They can't use that. Details about Huber's personality and history. Though Grosskreutz was able to tell the jury he ran after Rittenhouse that night because he believed the teenager was an active shooter, Huber's exact motivations for chasing the teenager and hitting him with the skateboard remain unknown. Therefore, we cannot act on what he could have been thinking, right? There is no way to do that. So the prosecution in this case painted a very vivid story based on a lot of theoreticals. And all of that, it was over the line in a lot of cases where the judge stepped in or the defense objected to it. But look, once you hear it, you hear it. So the defense said if prosecutors portrayed Huber as peaceful, then they would introduce evidence of his previous criminal conduct. At one point, Rittenhouse's attorney read from a criminal complaint alleging that Huber had once held a 6-inch butter knife to his brother's throat, ear, and stomach. We can't talk about any of that, right? Because it's not pertinent to this, and Huber is not there to defend himself. So we can't talk about it, right? You can't testify on behalf of somebody that's dead. Rosenbaum's psychiatric care in the days before the shooting. The jury heard on select details about Rosenbaum's mental state before the shootings. Rosenbaum had been released from the hospital just hours before the Kenosha shootings, where he had been under psychiatric care for following a suicide attempt. Rittenhouse's attorney sought to portray Rosenbaum as unstable and violent in the hours and minutes leading up to the shootings. It's hard to, you cannot testify to the mental state of the person that nobody really knew and he's not there to testify or be able to cross-examine. So you can't use that in the case. Expert testimony about whether Rittenhouse reasonably feared for his life. This I find interesting because he is there, and psychologically, I feel like they would be able to use that, but they're saying that prosecutors and Rittenhouse's attorneys struck a deal where Block would limit his testimony mainly to the timeline events rather than the reasonableness of Rittenhouse's actions. For their part, prosecutors agreed not to call a different use of force expert to support their arguments. A pretrial hearing, Black had offered a moment-by-moment breakdown of Rittenhouse's and Rosenbaum's, Hoover's, and Grosskreutz actions. He described why he believed Rittenhouse had reason to fear that the men could either assault him or take his gun and use it against him. Says, and quote, a citizen in that position, given those indicators, would it be reasonable to believe that they were about to be assaulted? I would argue yes, Black said. So, there's that. But they're not allowed to use the expert testimony. These are things that they are not allowed to use in their deliberations going forward. Now, will they? That's up for debate now, isn't it? Because let's be honest, as people that hear things, we can't unhear it. So when they strike it from the record, oh no, you have to retract that question. We heard the question. We looked at the person that is testifying, and we already determined what we think they're going to say. And if they didn't say anything at all, their actions may be enough to go ahead and subconsciously give us an idea of what we thought they would say. So trials like this are finicky. And when you have a prosecutor like Binger up there painting these narratives, painting narrative after narrative after narrative of really borderline just made up scenarios, because we can't say what would have happened had Rosenbaum reached Rittenhouse. We can't say that he would or would not have taken his weapon. He would or would not have harmed him. We do not know what would have happened. I do think that going forward, he probably would have. That's my personal opinion, not a statement of fact. But we cannot use that in deliberations. So it'll be real interesting to see what they do consider. There's a lot of controversy today with Binger holding an AR-15, pointing it at the jury with his finger on the trigger in a courtroom. It was just like a vast overstepping of safety. It was just crazy, like that he did any of it. But was it effective on the jury to say, okay, that's not okay? I don't know. I don't know what he was trying to do there. Maybe to show people that maybe that those men were terrified of him. But look, they ran after him. All three people shot ran toward the man with the gun. So I'm not sure what his angle was there, but we'll see how long the deliberations last. I mean, this is a high-profile case in the media, and its outcome will undoubtedly have long-lasting ramifications in the legal system because of Kyle's age and because of the use of the AR-15 as self-defense in this situation. It's going to be real interesting to see how this plays out going forward. So let me know what you think in the comments. We're going to follow the rest of the trial through the jury deliberations, through the the verdicts that come through, and we're going to talk about it. But I'd like to know what you think. So leave some comments below. Like the video if you don't mind. It would greatly help me out. Subscribe to the channel if you want. We're going to talk about all kinds of things moving forward, and I'll see you on the next one.